Hey Taurus, how's it going? Got some messages for you here today. And the first thing I got for you during my meditation on your energy, before I turned the camera on, I saw footprints in the sand. I think they're at like a beach. The sand was kind of wet. Like someone had just walked by. And then I saw a brain with electrical activity going on. And I immediately understood what the Oracle was trying to get me to talk about. Like, neuroscientists who are, let's say, atheistic or materialists, scientific materialists, like to think of the brain as the thing which creates consciousness. That consciousness is just a side effect of atoms and molecules and matter coming together in a way to form the human body, and then this body, this brain, generates consciousness. The other way of looking at it is that the brain and the nervous system in the human body are more like a radio antenna that receives consciousness. And one way of thinking about that, the second one, which is less materialistic and less atheistic, is this idea that a philosopher called Daniel Dennett, who I believe was on the losing side of this argument, wrote a book called Freedom Evolves. I think it was published in the 90s maybe. And I think he saw everything completely backwards. He saw the electrical activity in the brain creating consciousness. And he tried to time it down to like microseconds or nanoseconds of when an electrical signal went off in the brain and then when a person began to perceive something. Now, I don't know how you could possibly time something like that. That seems impossible, and the scientific experiments seemed very essentially impossible to observe correctly. But he wrote a book about it anyway. But the idea is electrical activity occurs in the brain, which creates consciousness, according to the materialist view. But that's like saying footprints in the sand just appear on their own. That there doesn't need to be a person that steps on the sand to create the footprints. The footprints just appear by themselves. Or the footprints then create the person. Right? It's nonsense. You can say that consciousness, your spirit, generates those electrical activity in the brain and then activates the brain and the body and everything else. That the neurological activity in the brain is caused by consciousness. It doesn't cause consciousness, it is caused by consciousness. And so this analogy of footprints in the sand is a very good analogy in my opinion. You know, electrical activity is caused by consciousness, the same way footprints are caused by a human. And imagine if you were a gnome living underground and you've never seen above ground. You don't know what reality is on the surface of a planet. All you see is the inside of rocks because you're a rock spirit. And sometimes you see these impressions, these footprints showing up just above you, like on the surface, and you think, whoa, these footprints just randomly show up. Wow, that's incredible. And you have no idea what a human is. You have no idea what feet are. You have no idea what's going on here. That's basically what neuroscientists are like when they look at brain activity. They just see, oh, look at this electrical activity. Look at these hormones being excreted. Wow, this is amazing. These things cause consciousness. These things cause our emotions. When it very well may be the opposite, where our emotions from our astral body cause our hormones to excrete. And our spirits, or our mental bodies from the mental realm, cause the electrical activity to occur in the brain. So maybe that's just, thinking about analogies is an excellent way of gaining insight about things. The human intellect understands reality based on analogy, and we have the alchemical maxim, as above, so below. So you can learn about the higher worlds and the invisible worlds through analogy, by studying the natural world, by studying the world that is perceivable to our five senses, and extrapolating analogies from that, seeing how things work in this physical, material, natural world, and discover analogies and apply them to the unseen worlds. And you can make a great deal of spiritual progress that way. At least you can really spiritualize your thinking that way. And I pulled a hexagram for you, and I got hexagram 56 from the I Ching, traveling. The fourth line is changing, so it changes to hexagram 52, keeping still. Traveling and keeping still, changes to keeping still. So here we have this concept of traveling, and what it means in this context is you're kind of in the position of a wanderer, where everybody around you seems like a stranger, or might literally be a stranger at this point in your life. And you're not remaining anywhere right now. You're sort of in between worlds. Now, this could be literally in between geographical locations. It could be between jobs. It could be between lives. It could be between anything that, you know, some old chapter and a new chapter. And you're in the liminal in-between stage here, where you're not very grounded, you're moving, and you have to move, because traveling usually comes after abundance, and we can't stay in abundance forever. When your abundance reaches its peak, you will see things don't really progress or develop anymore. Things don't grow anymore. They've reached their peak of abundance. And if you don't begin a new cycle with that, you know, abundance always declines no matter what. And you can get stuck in the decline if you don't start a new chapter and start a new cycle. So to avoid just stagnating with your abundance and just letting it decline all around you, you've made the choice to start a new cycle. Good idea. You did well in that regard. That's what you're supposed to do. And it's a difficult thing because, like, how do you move on now? How do you grow? How do you develop and change? Like, you've realized that all of life is constant change. The only constant is change. And it can be very difficult. And all this traveling could be internal. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything external. It can be changing from old beliefs to new ideas, or old worldviews have had to crumble and change and new worldviews have to come up. It could be all internal traveling. But the point of this is that you may feel unstable at this time because of being in between in this liminal state. But, you know, when you travel, even when you bring nothing along, there is one thing we always bring with us. Yourself. Sorry for the cheesy riddle, but it's true. And you can't travel to run away from yourself. That doesn't work. Or to run away from your problems if your problems are rooted within yourself. And this changing line here, this fourth line, changing to keeping still, we see a moment of taking some rest amidst this traveling. So it's like resting in a liminal place. Resting when you still have more to do. So you're resting because you have to, and you can enjoy it, but it's more like resting in a shelter or like a lean-to against a tree with a sleeping bag. You're not resting in a nice hotel. You're resting like on the road, and it's not a place you want to stay very long. You can enjoy it. You can enjoy the campfire you made and catch your breath and relax and get some sleep and make sure you're clear and healthy to move on. But you're still in that traveling phase. And it could be that you have opinions or views that are averse to everyone else's around you. Maybe they're averse to the ones you used to hold. And so there's some friction there. And there might be some issue, some, you know, it's a tough place to be in, traveling like this. It's not comfortable to travel. It's, unless you really enjoy it, but you know, it's nice to have a place to stay. It's nice when you're settled down, when your affairs are in order, and you can focus on doing something creative or whatever it is, or being with a companion, or just being happy on your own. Or it's nice to be in a stable position, and it's difficult to be in a moving position, whether it's internally moving and traveling or externally. So you're trying to figure out exactly what this place you're traveling to is, and probably trying to determine which road to take and what your best options are and how they're going to pan out. That could be a lot of what's going on here. And I think a lot of it has to do with spirituality or with current paradigms and views of things in this world, current epochal ideas, the way mainstream consciousness is. You might be at odds with consensus reality, let's call it. And you probably have your own views about it, and that's probably one of these things that's leading you on this path of development and change that you're on. And while it's difficult, it's ultimately for the best. Traveling is for the best. You've come out of a period of abundance, and that doesn't necessarily mean financial abundance or anything like that. It could, for sure, but it could also just mean an abundance of exposure to good knowledge and spiritual ideas, an abundance of working on yourself and developing yourself. And now it's time to really do something with it. Maybe some new knowledge has really made itself known to you, and it's kind of one of those you can't unring that bell type situations, and a lot of your old life doesn't fit anymore. Maybe people from your old life, relationships, things, habits, ideas, maybe literally a geographical spot. There's a lot that just didn't fit, so you left, you moved on, and that's the right thing to do in situations like that. Again, whether it's just internal. Because that's the cycle. You don't want to stagnate. You don't want to stay with the old if the old doesn't serve you anymore. So you made a really good choice, and now you're dealing with it. You're finding your direction. And I think your ideas, if you work by analogy, maybe you can study some Hermeticism or like alchemy or other, or the Upanishads maybe, if you're into the Vedic tradition. But something that works with analogy might get your mind around something, might help you pick a good direction for yourself. And working with analogy can help you see wisdom in even the most simplest of phenomena, like watching a ladybug crawl across a leaf, or watching a lightning strike and listening to the thunder afterward, or something like that. Maybe there's an analogy about how long it takes from when you see the lightning to when you hear the thunder. Maybe that's an analogy for something you need to know. But working with and by analogy right now might lead you somewhere good. But I'm going to develop this further because it's a little bit open-ended. I'm going to see if I can find some more information for you by pulling some cards and seeing what we can focus on. Maybe help you find some direction, or at least reflect. So what does Taurus need to know? Of course, no matter what I say, hopefully anything just helps you reflect. So here we have the closed fist. Bit of severity, bit of the left-handed path on the tree of life. If you know about the Kabbalah and the tree of life and the left hand and right hand and middle paths, the closed fist is my little symbol for the path of severity, the path of understanding. And, a lot of people think the left-handed path is evil. And while it can lead to evil, or people can use the left-handed path to an extent and be evil, the higher spheres of the left-handed path are not at all evil. It starts with the Mercurial sphere, then the Martian sphere, then the Saturnian sphere, and those are all the left-handed path. And they're, those are pretty heavy, difficult planets. So maybe you're like in that Mercurial sphere, that intellectual sphere, the 8th sphere on the tree of life, the 8th sphere. And it's very brainy. Maybe that's why I saw that neurological activity. It's very science-oriented, this 8th sphere. The High Priestess wanted to come peek out, and she kind of guides you along the tree of life, so I think talking about the tree of life here is going to be fruitful. So maybe you want to look into the Kabbalah, the tree of life, and check out maybe the 8th sphere and what it means to you, the Mercurial sphere, the sphere of splendor. In the Hebraic, it's called Hod. And maybe you're working with the ideal realm, the intellect, the mental realm, and trying to spiritualize your consciousness. And that's a really difficult stage in spirituality because that world, that 8th sphere, has a lot of deception and illusion in it. It's the most deceptive and illusory world there is. And modern science is like trapped in the 8th sphere. Modern scientists and academia and the modern paradigm of thinking like ascended from the earth realm into the 8th sphere and thought they found the secrets of reality, and they kind of just stopped there, and they can just swim and swim in this illusion forever if they want. You can easily get trapped in the 8th sphere. And like you can see the end of quantum physics with the Large Hadron Colliders. It's like they're literally a dog chasing their own tail. They shoot particles in circles at each other and see what happens, and they find smaller and smaller particles and have discovered that when they look for smaller particles, they will always find smaller particles. And you can find and look for smaller particles in that circular way forever and ever and ever. You will always find a smaller particle. There's an infinite number of them. And you will just get trapped not making any more scientific breakthroughs. So when you're traveling, you don't want to travel in a circle like those scientists at CERN, because I have a sneaking suspicion that they will never make any more breakthroughs in quantum physics. I think they hit their ceiling with that science, and they need a new science in order to move on. Hopefully one day they'll realize that. Otherwise, that's it for science. So there's a warning here. If you're taking the left-hand path, which is fine, strength and understanding and the intellect, spiritualizing the intellect, this is a good path. There's nothing wrong with taking the left-handed path. Just don't get stuck in the 8th sphere. Don't get stuck in any sphere. Every sphere has its klipoth. It's the dark side. Every sphere has its dark side. And the left-handed path is so much easier to slip into the dark side. The dark side of Mercury with illusion, the dark side of Mars with domination, and the dark side of Saturn with too dark for YouTube. And but if you got a good spiritual sense about you, a code of honor that you follow, you can walk the left-handed path and not turn into an evil person and not get lost, no problem. So we have the Queen of Swords. Yeah, this is definitely like spiritualizing the intellect. This is like no nonsense intellect. This is cutting away illusions, defending your mind from delusion, defending your mind from like phantasms and falsehoods, phantasms who would deceive you. Just clearing that stuff out like swiftly and severely. I mean, look, this Queen of Swords, she's got a head in her hands. She ain't messing around. She ain't fooling nobody, or she ain't fooling around with anybody. And yeah, this is a good energy to have when you're walking the left-handed path. Is this no nonsense, just absolute clarity of thought and self-defense. You know, maybe you want to do like banishing rituals and perhaps some what do they call them? Cord cutting rituals. You know, be really careful if you know using an iron blade to cutting imaginary cords or obstructions or leeches or any influences that you don't want in your life. You just sort of do a ritual where you kind of cut them from all around you, over your head, under your feet, behind you, and so on, slashing through the air with the intention of clearing out all the things that are holding you back and allowing only those spiritual influences which propel you forward for your highest and best good. So you might want to look into banishing rituals and cord-cutting rituals and the like, and just sometimes doing one is all it takes, and it really only takes like a minute. It's an interesting ritual. I find iron knives work the best. The metal of iron is a very interesting metal for that, for protecting against unwanted energies. And having just a sharp mental sword to cut through nonsense at this time will be really good, because when we're in a mode of traveling in this liminal state, especially a liminal state that's within this 8th sphere here, it's real important not to get swept up with new beliefs. Let's say you got rid of some old beliefs and some old opinions and some old views. This can leave a sort of vacuum within us where we feel kind of ungrounded. It's like, oh my God, now I don't understand anything. I thought I understood this. I don't understand it now. Like, what the hell? And that vacuum kind of wants to suck in any good sounding belief or opinion that comes its way. You know, just this might be a somewhat unfair example, but it's a very poignant one for our world. Is in in the 60s and 70s, when the traditional structures of Western spirituality and science failed for multiple generations, people turned to all sorts of beliefs real quick, especially in the United States. For those of you who are around in the 60s and 70s, I'm sure you know all the various movements, spiritual movements, cults, and new thinking institutions, all sorts of new movements and new thought stuff coming around, because people were just looking for anything that even sounded like it made sense, and any alternative was better to what they had been working with for a couple of generations, for generations previous. And of course, many of them turned to very, very bad ideas. Some of them turned to the worst ideas and became very, very bad people. The serial killer epidemic began in the 60s, I'll put it that way. Not that that's going to happen to you, but I just mean in a liminal state, when you've lost faith in old things or you've gotten rid of certain beliefs and views, we can be tempted to, or we can be easily persuaded and swayed into all sorts of things. So to protect yourself from being swayed, persuaded, taken advantage of, led into illusion, basically just look out for cult leaders and bad ideas. Just stay sober-minded as much as possible while you're exploring the eighth sphere here, and until you get into that sphere of, I don't know, maybe you want to go to the sphere of Mars afterward, or the sphere of the sun afterward. I would recommend going to the sphere of the sun. You could make a lateral move into the Venusian sphere or into the moon sphere. But moving through with clarity of thought and finding those tools to keep your intellect sober and dry. And it's difficult when we don't know things sometimes. Like when we had beliefs that we were certain of, it was okay, we could sleep at night, we didn't have burning questions. And then when those beliefs are dashed against the rocks by some experience that gave us this idea that, or this knowledge that our old beliefs and views don't work, they're not true, now we can have burning questions, and we can stay awake at night. We can lose focus at work because we're constantly thinking, like, how do I solve this? How do I wrap my mind around this? How do I don't know the answer to this question. I can't eat, I can't sleep, this is terrible. Well, we have to be okay with that. We have to learn how to be okay with not knowing things. And once you're okay with not knowing things, you feel better about it, then you won't be swayed by people's opinions, you won't be taken in by propaganda or deceptions, because you won't be desperate for answers. And if you're not desperate for answers, you can't be tricked by people. You can't be propagandized or brainwashed, because you've gotten to a point where you don't need the answer. It's not that you're not looking for it. You continue your research, you continue walking the path, you continue seeking for the answers, but you don't have this unbalanced desire for the answers. You're just like, I'll know when I know. I'm doing what I need to do to find out. I'll know when I know. I'm taking the opportunities as they present themselves. I've got a sober mind about it. I'm thinking it through. I'm reflecting on it. I'm using my intuition. I'm developing my intuition. I'm contemplating and meditating, and I'm going through the steps of unfolding this knowledge. It's fine. I'm not desperate for the answer. I trust that I'll know when I know. And then that tranquility makes you essentially immune to trickery, at least intellectual types of trickery. So finding some technique that allows you to just feel okay with not knowing. For me, it just took time. It just took a lot of, I guess, suffering, a lot of sleepless nights and problems like that, because I was obsessed with knowing everything. I just wanted to know how the universe worked and what reality was and what consciousness was and all that stuff when I was a lot younger, to the point where it practically drove me insane. And then, it got to the point where it's like, if I keep obsessing over finding out this stuff, I'm gonna have a horrible life. Like, it's gonna ruin everything. I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating, I have no friends. Like, the whole thing was just my life was deteriorating because I was obsessed with knowledge. And so like for me, like hitting that type of rock bottom is what made me okay with not knowing. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna chill. I'm just gonna enjoy this life. I'm not gonna give up my seeking. I'm just gonna, accept that I might never have the answer. And I don't know, just hitting that rock bottom kind of just made me shift perspective. So I'm not sure of any specific practice to help you get comfortable with not knowing. Maybe just some affirmation saying like, I am okay with not knowing, something like that. I trust I'll find the answer when I'm ready to find the answer, or when the answer is ready for me to find it. Maybe meditating on that concept, or again, seeking an analogy. Again, I think working by analogies is important now. I can't think of any analogy for this off the top of my head, but I'm sure you will discover one. So I'm going to pull another card here. Analysis. Man, I keep pulling this one. I've pulled this one like 4 times in the last week. Analysis. Yeah, we're still in that 8th sphere. This is a very intellectual, heady reading for you, Taurus. You're thinking a lot, and you're spiritualizing your intellect, which is super important. A lot of people forget to do that these days because it's very, very difficult and very, very tricky to spiritualize the intellect. It's easier to just spiritualize the emotional center and to spiritualize the astral body. That's much easier. You can learn just techniques to astral travel or to lucid dream or how to control your emotions, and that's good. You should do that too, of course. I'm not knocking it, but a lot of people stop there. You, however, want more, and I think that's one of the reasons why you're in this traveling state, why you're in this liminal state, perhaps with a little bit of adversity with those around you, or differences of opinions and differences of view, maybe with your old self or with the people around you, I don't know. But I think it's because you realized, wait, I have to spiritualize my intellect as well, and I'm not getting what I need. I'm not being nourished in that way in this old situation. I need to, maybe you got your abundance before traveling from working on the astral body or the emotional body or the physical body or things like that. And that abundance is like, okay, I've gotten where I need to go with that, at least for now. And I don't want to stagnate there. I need to spiritualize my thoughts now, my intellect. And so you're exploring the 8th sphere, which is where you go to do that. And it can be, like I've been saying, it can be very challenging. So maybe you're on that path, which is, so the sphere of Earth and the 8th sphere are connected by a path which is represented by the tarot card of Judgment. So if you know about the symbolism of judgment, maybe look into that. But this call of awakening, this clarion call, this trumpet call of, very vibratory. And keeping a clear mind with good vibrations helps to spiritualize your thoughts. So a lot of practices that have to do with spiritualizing the intellect can be like just chanting and repeating mantras. Prayer is another one. A lot of things that have like words that you can think about, those are good practices for now that can create like a guard around your mind from interference. Just make sure that these mantras or affirmations that you choose are good and healthy for you. Experiment with them for a few days and make sure they're having good results, and analyze whatever spiritual practices you're doing, whether it's chanting mantras or pranayama or anything at all, to really pay attention. Maybe keep a journal of your experiences every time you sit down or do your practices. Keep a journal of exactly when you did them, maybe what you ate before or how long it's been since you ate. Keep track of everything, how you felt during and after the practice, and before going to bed, how you feel before going to bed. When you wake up, write about how you feel, maybe what you dreamt of, and keep a very, very detailed journal about all of your practices and determine the effect that they're having on your life, and pick and choose the practices in that way. And this could be a lengthy process. This could take weeks or months, even years. I mean, I've been doing it for years. And it could just be something that you just do from now on. And that would be a very, very good thing to just analyze your spiritual practices. And that can spiritualize your intellect simply by analyzing yourself as you do your practices. But if this isn't about spirituality, if this is about some other matter in your life where some growth has stopped and you need to find out how to not stagnate and continue growing and developing, right now, crunching the numbers, looking at the data, looking at the trends, looking at charts and graphs, checking it all out, and finding a pattern, finding an analogy in the data, or an analogy that is appropriate for the data, like this data stagnated, this development, this growth is slowing down or stopped, or it's even declining now. Try and find an analogy in the natural world for that. You know, really crunch the numbers, get into the details, and see if you can find an analogy about how a tree grows, or about how lava shoots are formed in the Hawaiian Islands. I have no idea, but something could help you in that regard. So I'm going to pull one last token here for you, Taurus. One last thing to round this all out. What does Taurus need to know? This is sticking right in my hand. The star. Oh, hey, this is interesting. So these are one of my, this is from my set of astrology signs. That circle there, that's just the planets and stars, right? And this is just the star here and the number 4. But in the medieval era, there were the 7 spheres of, of the planets. There's spheres of influence, right? You had the sun, the moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And these were the 7 spheres, and they're spheres of influence around the Earth and around humanity. And then the so-called fixed stars, the zodiac and the constellations and all the other stars in the sky that don't wander like the planets or the wandering stars, these are the fixed stars. This was known as the 8th sphere. So we have a lot of 8th sphere energy going on today. Maybe you want to look into Rudolf Steiner and his ideas of the so-called 8th sphere. That can be kind of scary stuff about modern technology and computer science and some Mephistophelian stuff going on in there. But I think those ideas from Rudolf Steiner about the 8th sphere are incredibly important for today's world, and they might give you some insight, who Ahriman is, what Ahrimanic forces are, and what computer science means to us and to you, and how to maintain spirituality in an increasingly materialistic world, and all those sorts of things might be very fruitful for you to look into. But the 8th sphere of the fixed stars and the 8th sphere of the Tree of Life are different, in my opinion. I don't think they're related. I think it might just be a bit of a mathematical coincidence there. But I like to try and see holistic connections between all things. I don't try to force it, but I do like to build associations between things. This is how I learn by analogy and work through analogy, is by building associations between things and seeing patterns amongst things. And analogy leads to holism, holistic thinking, holistic systems thinking. So now is the time for you to take on holistic systems thinking. Build associations between various phenomena, create analogies, and see the pattern. Connect the dots, as an old teacher of mine used to say. Connect the dots. Don't be blind to the patterns. But also, the realm of the fixed stars, this is, maybe you want to pay attention to astrology at this time. Look into your zodiac, look into your chart progression and how it's affecting you today. Things like that might give you some insight as well. And maybe just as you take this short rest in the lean-to in your sleeping bag, perhaps it's the night to just look out at the stars. And this is the short rest that you need to enjoy, is just looking out at the stars. And sometimes when I'm outside lying on my back or just looking up at the night sky and I see all those stars, I occasionally get this wonderful sensation where I realize I'm not looking up, I'm looking out and forward. Because in space there is no up and down. And you can get this disorienting feeling where you feel like you're almost going to fall up off the surface of the earth. So remember that when you look up at the sky, you're not looking up, you're looking out. So I think, Taurus, that's where the Oracle and I are going to leave it here for you today. Thank you so much for stopping by. I always appreciate you hanging out with me. I wish you all the best, and I'll see you next time.